A slave who cannot envision their own revolt does not deserve freedom. Freedom is only achievable when we rely on our own strength, our own minds, and the capabilities of our people. This truth is illustrated by the story of a country in Africa, called Burkina Faso, which was on a mission to create a new path for itself. For many years, Burkina Faso faced a major challenge. It wasn't a war of guns and soldiers but a war against hunger. The country's leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, understood this challenge better than anyone. He saw that the true weakness of the country was not its military but its land. The land was rich and fertile but it lacked water. The rains didn't come regularly, and when there was no water, the land could not grow food. For years, Burkina Faso had relied on aid from other countries. The country found itself dependent on external food supplies, which diminished its freedom. This cycle of dependence made it vulnerable to the whims of those who controlled the food supply. Captain Traoré understood that a nation that cannot feed itself is essentially on a leash, like a dog that relies on others for its survival. This was not just about food, it was about the loss of true freedom. Captain Traoré understood this truth and made a bold decision. He realized that the most powerful weapon for Burkina Faso was not a gun, but water. If he could control water, he could ensure that his country could grow its own food, become self-sufficient, and free itself from the chains of dependence. This was a revolutionary thought. Instead of relying on loans from Western countries or turning to foreign companies to solve the problem, Traoré took a different approach. His vision was simple but powerful. Control the water and you control your future. The previous methods of relying on foreign aid and international projects had failed. Traoré understood that true freedom lay in the land of Burkina Faso itself, using local resources, local labor, and long-term sustainability. So Traoré's plan began with land and water. The most critical resource, however, was water. In the region of the Sahel, where Burkina Faso is located, the climate was becoming increasingly erratic. Droughts were becoming more frequent, and this was spiraling into a looming food crisis. While other African governments had been trained to simply ask for help in such times, Traoré knew that waiting for aid meant waiting for disaster. Instead, he decided to act, to fight back and build something sustainable. The world was shocked by his approach. African leaders had traditionally been seen as those asking for help, not those rejecting it. But Captain Traoré's declaration was clear: we will do this ourselves. By focusing on water, he wasn't just starting an agricultural project, he was starting a resistance movement. This wasn't just a technical project, it was an effort to make sure that Burkina Faso would never again have to kneel and beg for grain. It was a challenge to the system that profited from the hunger of its people. Why was water so important? Water is an equalizer. It doesn't care whether a country is rich or poor. It doesn't discriminate based on politics or resources. If you have the ability to control and direct water, you can transform a desert into fertile farmland. You can turn barren land into a productive environment. This is where Traoré's vision came into play. The Balmer Plains, a once forgotten region in Burkina Faso, became the central focus of his strategy. The soil in Balmer was rich, capable of supporting abundant crops, but it had always lacked one essential thing: water. The government had long promised to help, but nothing had ever materialized. Balmer symbolized both the potential and the neglect of the country's agricultural potential. Traoré knew that if he could make Balmer flourish, it would prove that anything was possible, even the most impossible. The choice of Balmer wasn't just practical, it was symbolic. This was a place that represented hope, the promise of a brighter future, and the challenge of a long history of broken promises. If Traoré could turn this arid, forgotten place into a thriving agricultural hub, it would show the world that Burkina Faso could take charge of its destiny, even in the face of adversity. He had made a decision not just for practical reasons but as a statement of defiance. The project he initiated was the Balmer Canal, a plan not just to irrigate fields but to transform the economy and spirit of the nation. It wasn't about simply moving water from one place to another, it was about giving people the tools they needed to build a future. By sending water to Balmer, Traoré was sending a message of hope. A message that even the hardest, most arid land could be revived with the right vision and determination. The Balmer Canal project wasn't just about irrigation. It was about building infrastructure, creating jobs, and giving people a sense of ownership over their future. The project would help transform 1,260 hectares of land into rice fields, while an additional 70 hectares would be dedicated to vegetables. This wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. The canal was a start to a much bigger plan to make Burkina Faso self-sufficient and food secure. What made this project even more extraordinary was the way it was executed. Unlike most large projects in Africa, which often rely on foreign companies with their own workers and technology, Captain Traoré's government decided to take a different approach. They insisted that the Balmer Canal would be built by the people of Burkina Faso, for the people of Burkina Faso. This wasn't just an infrastructure project. It was a statement that they were capable of taking charge of their own future. In most cases, these types of projects would take years, but Traoré set an ambitious timeline of just 8 months. This was unheard of in a region where foreign-funded projects often dragged on for years. The urgency was clear. The people of Burkina Faso couldn't afford to wait. The government organized the project like a military operation, working tirelessly to meet the deadline. The goal was not just to finish the canal, but to prove that with determination and unity, they could solve their problems on their own. As the construction began, thousands of people were employed in the project. Over 2,000 direct jobs were created, with many more opportunities in related sectors. This wasn't just about irrigation. It was about building the local economy, creating jobs, and giving people the skills they needed to thrive. The canal wasn't just a ditch in the ground, it was a modern engineering feat. Solar-powered pumps were used to ensure that the canal was sustainable, and advanced valves were designed to regulate the flow of water. This wasn't just a simple irrigation system. It was a state-of-the-art project that incorporated cutting-edge technology to ensure efficiency and sustainability. As the water began to flow, the land responded. Farmers, who had once struggled with the unpredictable rains, now had access to a reliable water source. They could plan their crops, rotate them to maintain soil health, and experiment with new farming techniques. This was no longer a place of uncertainty. It was a place of growth, opportunity, and empowerment. The canal project wasn't just about food production. It was a catalyst for economic transformation. New roads were built to connect farmers to markets, warehouses were constructed to store food, and water distribution centers were set up to ensure that every part of the region had access to the resources it needed. One of the most powerful effects of the canal was the impact on women. In many regions, women had been given the least fertile land that was difficult to farm. With the canal, they now had access to the same fertile land as men. Women's farming cooperatives flourished as they were able to invest in their land, grow their businesses, and take an active role in the economy. The canal wasn't just about food, it was about changing the role of women in society and empowering them to become economic leaders. The government of Burkina Faso had transformed agriculture into a strategic national priority. The importance of food sovereignty became clear. No longer did the country have to rely on food imports or beg for aid. They could control their own food production, set their own prices, and create a stable economy. This wasn't just about surviving, it was about thriving. As the project grew, the impact extended beyond Burkina Faso's borders. The country now had the opportunity to sell its surplus food to neighboring countries, creating new economic ties and building respect on the global stage. Food sovereignty was now a tool of political power, allowing Burkina Faso to negotiate with other nations as an equal, rather than as a nation reliant on aid. But the impact of the Balmer Canal wasn't just economic, it was also deeply social. The project had created a sense of pride and ownership among the people. Young people who had once left rural areas in search of work were now returning to their communities. They were no longer just surviving, they were building the future of their country. Through the canal, the people of Burkina Faso had proven that they could control their own future. They didn't need foreign companies or aid organizations to build their country. They had the skills, the resources, and the vision to do it themselves. The Balmer Canal was the beginning of a new era for Burkina Faso, a time of self-reliance, growth, and empowerment. In the end, the canal project was more than just a piece of infrastructure. It was a revolution. It was a revolution of people taking charge of their destiny, of a nation reclaiming its future, and of a movement built on hope, hard work, and resilience. The canal may have started as a simple irrigation project, but its impact was far-reaching. It had transformed the country not just economically but socially and politically as well. Now, Burkina Faso stands as a model of what is possible when a country takes control of its resources and future. The lessons learned from the Balmer Canal are not just for Burkina Faso, they are for the whole world. The canal didn't just bring water, it brought empowerment. It didn't just change the land, it changed the lives of the people. And it showed the world that Africa has the power to rise, not with foreign aid, but with its own strength, unity, and vision. The success of the Balmer Canal spread beyond the borders of Burkina Faso. As the country's agricultural output grew, so did its influence on the African continent. Burkina Faso's leaders began to leverage the country's newfound food sovereignty to engage with its neighbors in ways that had never been possible before. With a stable food supply, Burkina Faso could offer assistance to other nations facing droughts and food crises. The country's growing food exports helped strengthen relationships with neighboring countries, and it soon became known as a regional leader in agriculture. The Balmer Canal had transformed not just the local landscape, but the political landscape of West Africa. Burkina Faso was no longer seen as a beggar nation dependent on international aid. It was now a leader, a role model, and a symbol of what African nations could achieve when they took control of their own resources. Internally, the country continued to build on the momentum created by the canal project. Other regions of Burkina Faso began to implement similar irrigation projects, using the success of Balmer as a template for their own development. The government's commitment to local development continued, with a focus on ensuring that every region of the country had access to the resources it needed to succeed. The work of building a nation was far from finished, but the people of Burkina Faso were now equipped with the tools, knowledge, and confidence to build their future. And as the country's self-sufficiency grew, so did its international standing. Burkina Faso became a voice for African nations looking to break free from the cycle of aid dependency. The message was clear: Africa had the power to transform itself. It didn't need to wait for the West to save it. It didn't need to rely on foreign aid or handouts. It needed to look within to harness its own resources, and to build a future based on self-reliance, dignity, and unity. This was the ultimate lesson of the Balmer Canal. That true freedom comes when a nation can feed itself, when it can control its own destiny, and when it can stand tall in the world as an equal, not a beggar. The canal was not just a physical structure. It was a symbol of Africa's potential, a symbol of what could be achieved when nations believed in themselves, worked together, and took charge of their own future. As Burkina Faso continues its journey of self-sufficiency, the story of the Balmer Canal is evolving into something much greater than anyone could have anticipated. The canal is not just an irrigation system. It is a testament to the power of the human spirit and a reminder that change is possible, even in the face of immense challenges. The country's transformation is proof that Africa doesn't need to wait for foreign assistance. It can rely on its own resources, its own people, and its own ingenuity. Today, the Balmer Canal stands as a symbol of hope, not just for Burkina Faso, but for the entire African continent. It represents a new kind of development, one that is driven by the people, for the people. It shows that African nations can build their own futures, and in doing so, they can pave the way for other nations to follow. As the canal continues to grow and expand, so does the impact it has on the people of Burkina Faso. Farmers who once struggled to grow enough food to feed their families are now thriving, selling their produce at local markets and even exporting their crops to neighboring countries. The country's economic landscape has shifted, with agriculture at its core, supported by infrastructure and technology that allow farmers to be more productive, more efficient, and more independent. But beyond the tangible successes, there is a deeper transformation occurring. The people of Burkina Faso have gained something far more valuable than just food security or economic stability. They have regained their dignity. They have taken control of their destiny and created a future where they no longer have to beg for aid or rely on others. They have proven that with vision, hard work, and determination, anything is possible. The story of the Balmer Canal is not just a story of irrigation or agriculture. It is a story of empowerment. It is the story of a nation rising from the ashes of dependence and creating a new path forward. It is the story of a country that chose to build its own future, using the resources that were already available to it. The ripple effect of this transformation is still unfolding. The impact of the canal has not only reshaped the rural communities it serves but has also reverberated through the urban centers, where young people are seeing agriculture in a new light. They are returning to their roots, seeing farming not as a desperate last resort but as a thriving industry full of opportunities. As a result, the country is experiencing a renaissance in education, innovation, and youth entrepreneurship. The leadership of Captain Traoré has sparked a movement, and this movement has sparked another, a movement of hope, pride, and independence that is spreading across Africa. It is a movement that challenges the old narrative, one that says Africa needs the West to survive. Burkina Faso has shown the world that Africa's greatest resource is not just its land, but its people, their knowledge, and their resolve to rise above their circumstances. Conclusion. The Balmer Canal is more than just a canal. It is a beacon of what Africa can achieve when it believes in itself, when it harnesses its own potential, and when it focuses on long-term, sustainable growth. It is a symbol of self-reliance, pride, and power. It is a symbol that reminds us all that change doesn't come from waiting. It comes from taking action. As Burkina Faso continues to thrive, it offers a message of hope to the world, that even the most difficult challenges can be overcome, and that true freedom comes when a nation has control over its own future. The success of the Balmer Canal is proof that, when a country takes ownership of its resources and its destiny, it can overcome any obstacle.